Hey, I'm Matt. Welcome to my podcast, The Imagining, a time to explore the imagination, creativity, and mental health. All of the conversations I'm having form part of the research for my new book. I hope that you have the opportunity during this time to discover something new about yourself. Okay, we're here.
Good.
Thank you so much for joining me on lastminutepodcast.com.
Okay.
This is what this is. So we just literally, I was telling you about the other guests that we had on the podcast so far, and I wonder whether you could give me an elevator pitch of who you are, what do you spend your time doing, and what do you like to eat?
Well, it could be a very long, many-floored elevator ride. I'm not sure I've got it down to the 20-second elevator pitch that you're supposed to have in these situations.
Is it meant to be 20 seconds?
I think so. In
Okay,
business,
well, you can have a
we
bit
always
longer than
try to say to people, try to get it all down to 20 seconds.
In podcasts,
It doesn't matter.
You can have however many minutes you like. Mate.
Yeah. So I've been involved in the recruitment industry for a long time, and so much so to say that 3 or 4 years ago we set up a business which helps recruitment companies scale. So my job is to work with chief executives and founders of companies to help them scale, and that's one part of the life that I lead.
Yeah.
I've got 6 kids and the schools and the church and the football and all the things that go along with that. I'm involved in a couple of charities, one a local charity that looks after mental health and mentoring in the local secondary schools called Made for More. And then another one is an international charity based out in Nazareth in the Middle East that provides healthcare, education and tourism. And I'm one of the trustees of that. So
it's a bit of a mix. Then.
It's a mix of all sorts of stuff
It's a bit crazy,
that I love to do.
It? Now, I would like to make a statement regarding the recruitment industry. I feel as though when I hear recruitment, it sounds like the opposite of fun. And it perhaps has quite a boring rep attached to it. I might be wrong, but do you feel that is a creative pursuit, being in recruitment?
I personally, I feel it is, because I think there is an immense privilege in finding somebody a job. Next to someone getting married, someone buying a house and having a family, all of that sort of thing, actually having a job, having a career, finding a career, pursuing something that is creative, pursuing something that you enjoy, that's quite a privilege. So being a recruitment person whose job is to match the candidate or the contractor or however we describe them with the organisation that's going to help them find that, I think is a real privilege. Doesn't mean that everybody who works in recruitment feels the same.
Yeah, for sure.
But for me, when I kind of fell into recruitment, I wanted to do something completely different. And I went to a recruitment agent who said to me, have you ever considered a job in recruitment? To which I said, what's that then? And he said, it's what I do. I find people jobs. Oh, there's people that do that.
Yeah.
And from an industry point of view, it's the 6th biggest industry by turnover in the United Kingdom.
Wow.
So it's bigger than engineering. Because if you think of the number of people that have to find a job, then there's somebody there to help place them.
That's crazy.
So it's a big industry.
I was having a conversation on a previous episode with a careers advisor.
Yes.
And one of the questions I asked him, and it might apply to you in this case, is careers advice more about mitigating anxiety for people or more about empowering their imagination? How do you feel it might not? Does that applies to the recruitment process?
It depends which angle you're looking at it. So if you're looking at it from the person who's finding the person a job, they may be motivated entirely by the desire to make a placement, to make a sale, because they'll get commission from it.
Yeah.
That may be a motivation for them. So they may not care necessarily whether that person is going to feel more anxious about taking the job or happy and more creative.
They just want
to make the placement.
Make the sale, yeah.
Now, hopefully, that isn't the attitude that the companies that I'm working alongside portray.
Yeah.
But it could be that way because it can be quite fast moving. I think if you're going to be a really good recruitment consultant, you have to understand the motivation of the person you're trying to find the job to.
Yeah.
So the question you've asked me is a great question to ask them. You know, what is it that puts a spring in your step? How do you like to be led? How do you like to be managed? How do we get the best out of you?
Yeah.
Well, if you know a few of the dynamics around that, you can then work out actually company X would be better for them or company Y.
Yeah.
The whole concept now of a lot of people working from home and the cultural challenge of, well, how do I keep you motivated when you're working from home versus coming into the office? That's all of those dynamics breed either anxiousness or creativity. And if you've made the placement, you've made the sale, you want them to stay.
Yeah.
You want them to be happy.
Do you feel like there's any trends that you're noticing in people? Let's think about the people that you're trying to find to be in a job. Is there any trends of things which you're going, oh, okay, there's a general kind of anxiousness about this, or this is the sort of thing really inspiring people? I mean, I know that you mentioned working from home is perhaps a really big one at the moment, where I don't know whether that's more about fulfilling a kind of, this is just more pleasurable comfort life to me, or whether an aspirational kind of dream. But are you noticing anything pop up again and again?
Well, there's an anxiousness in people about all of that.
Yeah.
Because before, pre-pandemic, 3 or 4 years ago, if you had a job that was office-based, shall we say, you went to the office.
Yeah.
Now, it's changed. So working from home is like living at work, and that causes anxiety. And if the person who can help ease that anxiety is only a Zoom away, then that can also cause anxiety because you can't look them in the eye in the same way. You can't see the body language. You can't see the dynamic. People don't feel as relaxed.
Yeah.
For some, Matt, it's completely opposite. They love the freedom of doing what they want when they want. And if work for them is about outputs, as long as they get the job done, they don't mind where they do it from.
Yeah.
And then there's that anxiousness of, there's a whole communities, huge communities of people that don't even have the privilege or the pleasure of having that choice. If you're a nurse, the whole argument of whether I go to work or not, or whether I can work from home, you can't. So the stresses of your daily job are there, and you're looking at other people going, well, hold on, I have to do this every day, and this is a tough job.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people like that. So the whole work dynamic has altered for everybody, and everybody's trying to find their feet in what it means.
And would you say that we're beginning to see any kind of settling down of that since COVID? Or, because obviously COVID really exploded it.
Yeah.
Are we beginning to find any kind of stable ground again in that kind of working space?
I think we are, but it depends on the age group.
Right.
If you're a younger person in the world of work, you want to be working, for the most part, this is a generalisation, but what we're seeing is those young people want to be with other people.
Right.
They want to be in an environment where after work they can go and socialise. Whatever job that is, whether it's an office job, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a nurse or whatever, you need something outside of the dynamic of work to feed your soul, to just help you relax.
Yeah.
That's difficult to do at home if you're on your own and you haven't got family.
Yeah.
For older folk who have come back into the work, so what we have seen is a real trend of the over 50s during COVID thinking, actually, I've done my bit. I've got a pension maybe for some if they're lucky, or their mortgage is paid off, so they don't have to work. COVID's finished and they've come back and said, actually, I do want to work. I want to do 10 hours a week or 12 hours a week or 15 hours a week. So they're now in the workforce. So it's the first time ever that you've got 3 or 4 generations of people working together.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened before.
It's weird, isn't it?
So
with all very different preferences on where that work is happening.
And very different dynamics. Yes, I guess I'm talking a lot more about office type jobs, but even now you've got, in the classroom, you've got 70-year-old teachers and 21-year-old teachers. So in the staff room, what is that dynamic like? And if you're thinking about, if you're 21, are you anxious that everybody's much older than you? If you're 70, are you anxious that everybody's much younger than you?
Yeah.
So to your earlier question, there's that anxiety factor still there.
Yeah.
Wherever you are, it's still, how do I be the best of myself when there's these young people here or these older people here, you know?
Would you consider yourself to be creative? Do you think of yourself as creative?
I don't think of myself as creative, but I do think I have creative ideas. So I'm surrounded by people, even in my family. My daughter's a graphic designer. Yeah, she is absolutely creative. It comes to her, and she writes it down, and she does. So in that sense, I don't think of myself as creative. I'm not particularly arty. I read a lot, but I'm not. I don't think of myself creative in that way. But then I come up with things that I think would be an idea, and I say, "Come on, let's have a look at this idea." I'm a great ideas person. When I was working, not running the business I run now, I used to be told I was great at coming up with ideas, but I never used to finish them properly. But that's okay. There's another 10 coming anyway.
Right.
Yeah. So in one respect, that could be considered to be quite creative.
I mean, I think absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
but I wouldn't think of
you wouldn't think of
I wouldn't think of myself as creative.
Why do you think that is? Because one of the big questions that keeps coming at me around this whole process of writing is this question: is everyone creative? And I would consider you to be one of the most creative people I know in my community. Yeah. And it's just fascinating to me that you don't really think of yourself like that.
Because I think of creative people as people who do stuff that you can see, whereas some of my creativity is trying to help other people be a bit more creative in their thinking. So it's almost trying to draw out of them creativity.
Right. So you feel that your job is very much about creating space, which empowers creativity.
Yeah. I'm a great believer that most people don't believe they're as good as they really are.
You're a great believer that most people don't believe that they are
as good as they are.
As good as they are.
I think the potential in people is immense. And if only everybody could see it and tap it, and if only they knew it. And I think and some people, it doesn't bother them at all. They're very happy with the way they are. And then you have a conversation with them. I just think, wow, that's genius. That's brilliant. So you try to draw it out and then think, well, how could we apply that in your marriage? How could we apply that in your volunteer work or in your work, whatever it is, how can we apply it? And that's often by conversation that it comes out, but then they go back into their world and their shell or whatever, and they don't think, oh, well.
So this may not specifically move into recruitment, but I think maybe you speak into this in a multitude of ways. What for you is like the keys of reaching into someone and dragging out that best self, if you like? Like, how do you go about that process of reaching in and saying there's more to you than you're seeing of yourself?
I think it comes, in my experience, and this is where I've learned in recruitment, it comes in stillness. In asking them a question, and when they don't answer, filling that gap.
Right.
Because people are uncomfortable with silence and feel they have to speak. So if you've got something in you, if I ask you a question and you don't answer it, and then I just ask you another one, we've lost that opportunity to find out what it is that person's thinking.
Yeah.
So if you pause and pause again and pause again, eventually most people will say something. And it's that something that you can begin to draw out. Yeah, that could be as simple as something happened in their holidays in the Lake District, and so why did you go to the Lake District? Those sort of things. I've always said I have one question that in 20 years I've used as the same question for every interview I've ever done when I'm interviewing a candidate. It hasn't changed in 20 years. And the question is, tell me exactly from the moment you got up what you did yesterday. Yeah. So I don't go along the tell me is the Jaffa a cake or a biscuit? Those inane type of competent. Yeah. Those. I don't ask any of that. I just ask that one question. That's the only question I ask. And out of that question comes, you get up at 6 o'clock. You get up at 6 o'clock. What did you do? Do you always get up at 6 o'clock? Is it an alarm, or do you just wake up? Alarm, or do you need the alarm? Because would you sleep through without an alarm? Absolutely, I would. Yeah. So you, and then suddenly you start asking lots of questions, and of course, what follows is about 25 other questions.
Yeah.
But what you get to is the person, and the interviewer's job is to make that person feel relaxed, because you want to get the best out of them. Because in a recruitment sense, you're trying to find if they're the right fit for the company that you're recruiting for. So you then begin to find, and if people are quiet, and it's okay to be quiet, not everybody has to be buoyant and bubbly and happy. They can be quite quiet, but you can then draw more out of them in that way. And sometimes people are really uncomfortable. They don't want you to draw things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They don't want to tell you.
Please don't draw me.
Yeah, please don't
draw me out.
But you need to know that if you're going to place them in a job. You need to know that if you're going to mentor them in a school. You need to know that if you're doing some of the other work that I do in the Middle East. You need to find out what it is that's driving them, what motivates them, how you get the best out of them.
Because I think that one of the defining shapers of obviously the resource that we give to in our brains, in our imaginations, is exactly that, is finding out these driving kind of keys, and that lends itself right the way into recruitment, all the way through to just the decisions you're making about what to eat for breakfast and when to wake up in the morning. How have you responded in your own life to pursuing your imagination? Is that something which you thought about before?
Probably not in directly in that way, but the things that give me a buzz are seeing other people get on, do well, or whatever that may be. Whether that's one of the kids on a football pitch, whether it's something in a church, whether it's a work thing. So I think in that respect, that's an imagination. I went through a thing I had to do for a company I worked with. This is about 20 years ago, and it was called Core Purpose. And you spent 2 hours talking with somebody, and then they wrote everything down. And the word, we now probably call it a word cloud. But in those, it was called Core Purpose. And what 2 words came out?
After 2 hours
After 2 hours of conversation. And for me, and I always remember this, it was electrifying people.
Right.
And the person who was talking to me about it was saying, because you're clearly a person who thrives on being with people, which is true. But there's a spark, hence the word electrifying, when you talk about people. Wow. So that must be something to do with imagination, even if I don't think of it in that way.
And I think that's the real treasure chest of the treasure of the conversations I'm having, is that gradually, piece by piece, it's like we've reconciled that actually the imagination speaks into so much of what we do. What at the moment is perhaps what's the biggest cost that you're paying with maybe your mental health at the moment? I know that's a straight in question, but is there something that is particularly taxing for your emotional and mental resources?
I think for me, Matt, I'm involved in quite a few things, and I'm one of those people that likes to do things well. And that's not always a good thing, because I think sometimes it's just important to do things. You don't have to do them all 100%. Just doing stuff is okay. So if I'm one of those people, which I think I am, I want to do things well, then I get a little bit anxious if I don't think I'm doing them as well as I think I should. Other people are worried about it. I am. So therefore that has that capacity. I do have to sometimes stop, and literally the way I recharge my batteries and go back to my own mental health is I go for a walk. And that sounds very that almost sounds a bit flippant, but literally I have to get up from wherever I am, and it has to be outside.
Yeah.
And it come rain, shine, snow, whatever, I'll literally go for a walk. And I was feeling anxious this morning, and literally went out, and it was teeming with rain this morning.
Yeah.
So no sane person would choose to get up and go for it. But I had to, because I had to. You know that phrase, clear your head?
Yeah.
Well, it was, for me, it's like clear your mind. I had to just kind of, I don't know, I need to rebalance, because I'd had 3 or 4 conversations with 2 different owners of 2 different companies.
Right.
That were stuck in some sort of loop, and I was there to try to give them advice, and they weren't taking my advice. Now, it's up to them whether they take it or not, but the fact that they weren't, I could see from the outside what was happening. But then I would find myself getting really anxious.
Yeah.
Because it was a question of, well, if you only did this, this would happen, and you're paying me to give you this advice and you're not taking it, which is their freedom. They have that free will. But I was finding myself getting stressed about it. And I think from a mental health point of view, if you don't address it, it builds up.
Yeah.
And we know enough about some of the work that we do with the teenagers from the mental health charity, that if you can't verbalise it, articulate it in some way, write it down, talk to somebody, it builds up, and then that's where it becomes much more of a problem.
What would you feel in your capacity in across all of the things that you do? How would you encourage those that are perhaps feeling a bit... I've always, in my life, you've represented almost someone that has done what you've said. You've reached into me and you've pulled out ideas in me, not only about my company, but just me in general as a person. What is the advice that you almost feel most people need to hear? I know that's a really broad question. But there's been something really special that, as someone that's seen a bit more life than I have, and someone that I feel like has, but you have an ability to curate spaces for people, as we've spoken about, and I've had first-hand experience of sitting within one of those spaces purely by just natural happenings rather than anything deliberately set up or anything. What is it that people almost most need to hear at the moment, do you think?
It's a multi-layered question. And I think we were talking on a webinar from our company space, and it's that bit of saying to people, it's okay not to be okay. And to recognise if you're not feeling okay, or if you're not acting okay, because it's not just about feelings, it's how you act on the feelings that you feel. If you're not feeling great, recognise that's okay. Let's try to meet you where you're at, rather than you worrying about where you want to be. And I think it's trying to give people the freedom to deal with that, because we live in a society that demands excellence now. I was talking at an event not so long ago, and one of the other people at the event said, 10 years ago, a long-term strategy was 3 years, and a short-term strategy was probably a year. Whereas now, a long-term strategy is 6 months, and a short-term strategy is 6 days. And if you haven't done what you need to do in 6 days, you're going to fail. Well, if you're anxious, or you're feeling off the ball, or you're not feeling mentally as strong as you'd like to feel, and the world around you is moving at such a pace and everything's changing, you're almost in a kind of some sort of vortex where you can't see the end. And I think it's to try to help people come out of that and say that just because the world's moving at that speed, and it feels like it is, but it may not be, but if it feels like it is, let's recognise that's how you feel. And let's try to bring a bit of calmness, a bit of, you want people to be happy. And for me, happiness is the capacity to be content.
Right.
That's all happiness is. Do you have the capacity to be content with where you are, what your situation is? because things may be tough, but if you can recognise that they're tough, but you can get through them, it brings a contentment, even in the maelstrom of everything being, and that can help with mental health. Just going along to somebody and saying, "Don't worry, it'll all be over, it'll all get better. Oh, this happened to me and I did this," that isn't helpful. Because it feels like somebody else is telling you what it's going to be like. Whereas what you want to know is, well, this is how I am. And this is how I need to make whatever that next step is.
Let's jump from that, which is perhaps on a more of a personal driven question, and jump a bit more into a businessy question here. Say I am a businessman. And at this point, I've very much proven to myself that business is not my strong suit. And I am someone who is coming to you, and we're just having a conversation. And I know that you work in the capacity of advising on to a number of different companies about a number of different things. And I have a plethora of ideas about how we should move forward. Let's call them imaginings to fit within the title of this podcast.
Yes, yeah.
I have a number of imaginings which all perhaps feel very beneficial and all feel very exciting. How would you support someone to whittle down a number of imaginings from an external perspective?
Well, there's a premise there that you're suggesting that they have to be whittled down.
Right.
And my experience is you don't have to whittle them down. What you've got to try and do is pick 2 or 3 that drive your purpose. And if you're trying to run a business, is the purpose of your business to make money and have profit and reinvest and yada, 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 and become the next Bill Gates or whatever, if that's your purpose, then what helps with that? But your purpose may be to actually help other people. And you're not too worried about whether you make any money because you don't need to because you've got money. Yeah. And if you're an Imagineer, if you're someone that comes up with lots of ideas, the last thing you want is someone to knock them on the head. You know that game where you have the hammer and the little things pop up? Well, if you're an imagination person, you don't want someone hitting with a hammer to pop down because they will pop up again. Because the way your brain is wired, you'll be in the shower and you've got the next thing that's going to change the world. By the time you've had your breakfast, you've got 3 of them. Yeah. Well, that's what we want because that creativity drives. That drives some sort of inherent desire to move forward. As a business advisor, if I can find out what your purpose is, then I can try to help you realise that keep going, but let's focus on these 2 or 3 things.
Right.
But I wouldn't ever want to whittle them down. I just want to rest them.
Okay.
Yeah. Or maybe just spend a little bit less time on them. There used to be a saying, people say, you can't ride 2 horses at once. Well, don't then get in a car. Because if you don't just do whatever makes you creative, whatever makes you thrive, whatever brings that sense of passion, and whatever it is, that's what you got to hone. Don't try to knock bits of it off. And then you see people who look at people like that and think, how do they exist? How do they get anything done? Well, they get lots of things done. Yeah. Lots and lots of things done. And they're also the sorts of people that the busier and crazier they are, the more you give them, the busier and crazier they get. Yeah. You then have to watch the mental health side of that. Yeah. So that there isn't that burnout. But some people absolutely thrive in it. And I'm interested in what makes people thrive. Yeah. That's what because if you can harness the bit that makes them thrive, as long as they're not losing the things that they have to do as well, because the last thing you want is a fantastic business, but you have no friends. Your marriage breaks down, or your relationship with your partner breaks down, or your kids don't speak to you, all of that sort of stuff. Well, that for me isn't a successful business person. Yeah. It's a successful person in a business, but not a successful business person.
Right.
And there's a big difference.
So I was in, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a profiling tool where it has a red, yellow, blue, green,
yeah.
kind of identifiers. And we were in a talk where they had added this mysterious silver cube. And this mysterious silver cube was called the creative cube.
Okay.
For anyone that listens to me, I'll get on my hobby horse. I truly believe everyone is creative. So I was just like, give everyone the silver cube. But for the purpose of this person's talk, that wasn't going to happen. And they were very determined that only a specific group of people identified as this mysterious fifth. However, she did say something very useful. And it was that for those that have an abundance of imaginings, the best thing to do is let them articulate everything they possibly can and treat them seriously in the moment, fully well knowing that most of them ideas might be gone in the next couple of hours. But it takes the articulation of all of the imaginings, the exploring of the imaginings, for them to process what is going to actually work best in reality. Because I think that there is sometimes a bit of a judgment around overtly imaginative, creative people who are very loud about their creativity and imagination, that, oh, they've just got another idea. And in a sense, perhaps it would be better, or if it was better understood, that just creating space, and that was a way of processing, getting to the right idea. That would maybe be helpful. And like that hammer you were talking about, there is maybe a tendency to be like, oh, that person's got another idea. I mean, I do it myself as someone that tries to deeply encourage it with certain people, particularly people I don't really like sometimes. You want to take that hammer and you want to just bash it down and say, shut up.
But you have to understand, the person who's holding the hammer, why do they feel they have to do that? Because actually, if everybody is creative, and I agree with that assumption, that means the person who's bashing the creative person is creative. So what is it that's making them stop that person being their true self? And if you then find out, well, what is it? Why are they doing that? You could go quite deep into understanding what it is that's quelling their imagination a bit. And it could be a time-bound thing. It could be the way they've been led in the past. It could be the way they're managed now. It could be that. What I find in business is most of the reasons why people do the things are not driven by business. They're driven by other things that are going on in their lives.
And that's leads nicely onto the follow-up question I was thinking of. What is the thing that's killing creativity, do you think?
I think it's probably a lack of understanding about what creativity can deliver. Because in a work setting, you've got a certain things to do and you're not given time. Time is a killer of creativity because everybody is pressurized. Not everybody, a lot of people feel pressurized to do something by a certain time. Because if they don't get paid. If they don't hit a target. If they don't, a person could die in a nurse. So there's real big things that change that make people's behaviour change. But if there's a little bit more time, and in a society which doesn't value time, it values urgency, and there's a difference. You and I could talk for 2 or 3 hours and get lots of stuff together, but if we have 5 minutes, because you've got to catch a bus or I've got to go, that quality's not going to be there. So if you can give people a bit more space, and it goes back to why I asked that question. Tell me what you did from the moment you got up, because I want to understand. Do they live their life in an urgent way? Do 6 o'clock get up and have my breakfast at 6:10, and the gym at 6:40, and I get the bus at 7? It's all urgent. So is there space for them to execute the job that I'm trying to interview them for? Because that may need a bit more time. You may need to get alongside people. We had a very sad situation in our life where we lost a baby 18 years ago, and one word changed how I responded to people. So people would often say, "How are you?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd answer. But most times people didn't have the time to listen to the answer.
Yeah.
Or they were a bit afraid of what I might say. But the one word that added to that sentence was, how are you today?
Yeah.
It's transformational. Because today I may be feeling fine, but tomorrow I'm not. And today we don't need to extend the conversation much, but tomorrow if you ask me that, actually I really would love to talk to you about it. I'd love you to listen. I'd love you to invest some time in me because I feel terrible. But you've asked me, and you've asked me with the word today on it, so it means that I want you to engage with me. And we don't live in a society that does engagement particularly well. It does urgency really well. But is that better? I don't think so.
So, in a sense, would you consider time to be the fuel for a fire of creativity?
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got a bit more time. Because for the people that perhaps I would define in my limited knowledge of not being creative, because they need some time and space to discover that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I had a chap who worked for me who was an accountant in our finance team. By everybody's sense of what he was like, he was quite dull, to use a negative word, and he wasn't at all, but that's what people thought, because he just did the numbers. Outside of work, he ran a scout troop and built a boat that he sailed to the Philippines. So my question to my leadership team was, why? What are we not tapping into that this chap has got? Because he's left us to go and sail around the Philippines to a boat that he built. What a fantastic person. We've missed it.
Yeah, we
just didn't
give
invest
him the resource
time
he needed.
Yeah. Or we decided he's good with numbers, so he was defined by what he did.
He took that hammer to his head. And
Absolutely right.
That's what
and it was a salutary lesson to us, and to me particularly, because I was responsible for leading the team that led him.
Wow.
So I'd missed it. And when he came back, then somebody said, but when he comes back, he'll probably come back and work for us in finance. And I looked at him and said, in a million years, he's not going to come back and work for us. It never is going to happen. No. And also, if he did, I'd say, don't come back to us. We
did a bad job.
We did a bad job on you. You're much better than we ever thought you were. Go and carry on. And there's a lot of people like that we miss, that we don't know.
Yeah.
And it comes back to time and urgency and pace.
So one of the tools that a guy called Jordan Peterson uses to measure creativity, I only heard him speak about it once on a YouTube video, so it might not be a frequently used tool. However, I am going to use it on you, and we're going to assess your creativeness, your imaginativeness.
Yes.
And perhaps next time you encounter an accountant that you assess as dull, maybe you could use this to figure it out. I would like you to name me 5 uses for a brick.
Oh, on its own?
On its own.
Right, so you could stand on a brick and make yourself taller, so you get a better view of wherever you are. You can put it together with another brick and use it as building something. That brick could be the cornerstone of whatever else is to come. It could be the first brick to a house. You can use a brick to stop things. So if your car's about to roll downhill, you need to stick a brick in to stop it, so it can become a tool to stop things. Depends on the colour of the brick. But if you wanted to be a bit creative and your house was all grey and you had a red brick, you could stick the red brick really visible so you could see it, so it becomes a visible thing. And my sister's partner is a builder, and he has said there are 150 types of bricks, and he can wax lyrical about bricks forever and a day because he loves them. So for me, I'd use it to get Mitch to tell a story about bricks. Because you look at it as a brick and think it's just a brick. He would be horrified if you said that to him. It's not a brick.
It's not a brick.
It's not a brick. Oh. There's so much to it.
So much to it.
Yeah.
The reason I asked the question, and I would say you did solidly averagely on answering.
I'll take solidly average.
The idea being that the further away from the most traditional uses of a brick
Right.
that you can
Okay.
conceive of.
Yeah.
I may have not made it clear enough in the task, however, but the further away from the most traditional uses of a brick that you can think of, the quicker and more natural it is for you to have divergent creative ideas that don't stick within
That's fair. Yeah.
the common discourse of a brick.
Right.
There we go. That is it. So, a hollowed out brick could be an office building for ants.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's still building, so it's still not that far.
Yeah.
And I had some time to think about it. So it doesn't really count.
If Mitch were here, he would only ever keep to the bricks.
Yes.
He would always be offended if you think if they're there for building. That's what I do.
Don't ever use a brick for anything other than building.
Build a house. Build a
Especially
well.
if it's, exactly. Thank you so much for a very good conversation.
You're welcome.
I deeply appreciate your thoughts on all of the things that you've spoken about, and I deeply appreciate you. And I feel as though if everyone was lucky enough to have a Dave Pye in their community, then the world would be a better place. And I hope that you've enjoyed having this conversation.
It's been great, and it'd be lovely for you to reflect back on all the different people you speak to and see what themes there are.
Yeah,
because you're speaking to a fascinating group of people, and that's quite a privilege for you to be on the other side and seeing how people are and what draws them out.
And it's such a broad.
Yeah, I bet.
Even today, the people I've been with today, the variation in just people's understanding, and you just realise how deeply individual humans are. There is people who have so much nuance to their life. I mean, obviously there's a lot of commonalities between humans as well, but it's been a real privilege. And actually I watched this thing with a guy called Ken Burns talking about how he made documentaries, and one of the things he spoke about was when you interview people, when people give you an answer to a question, an honest answer to a question, treat it like precious material, precious gold, precious stones, because that is someone's real life, real thoughts. So I will treat your thoughts like diamonds, mate. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode of The Imagining. I hope that you've had the opportunity to discover something new about yourself. If you wouldn't mind and you enjoyed listening, then I would be really appreciative if you subscribed on whatever channel you're listening on.